Hi everybody, this will be part 5 in the character rigging tutorial series. Last video we talked about how to set up the leg joints. So we have the pelvis from the torso from the pelvis all the way to the head, and then we have both leg systems set up, and we have one skeletal system as is parented all together. This video we're going to talk about how to create the arms and the finger joints. So from the arm joints we're going to use primarily the top view and the perspective and front view. So we'll make sure in the top view we hit 6, and we're going to go to shading X-ray joints so that we can 6 changes so we can see the textures. Shading X-ray joints makes it so we can see the joints here. So our arms actually start from a clavicle bone. Really we have a couple of other anatomical bones that create and make up that shoulder complex. Clavicle and scapula as far as the shoulder blade and collarbone. We're going to create primarily just one that's going to allow it to blend and deform in a similar way as the shoulder complex. So we're going to start really from the clavicle and then work our way to the shoulder, elbow, wrist, and then down to the fingers. So we've positioned the arms so that they are in a T pose, and this is going to work the best for if we want to create inverse kinematics for the arms. The previous video we set up the legs so we have a forward bend of the knee, so that way we can create inverse kinematics of the legs properly, and then the arms, they're bent forward, so that way we can create inverse kinematics of the arms properly as well. Alright, let's get back with our joint tool, and from the front view I'm going to go in here and click and drag where I think the collarbone might be, which is probably going to be right on here or something. There are a couple ways to do this, and the collarbone in general is primarily going to be like up close to the front of the body, and that'll work, but if we want to use this as kind of a combination of the scapular and the collarbone, then we really need to put this in the center of the body. So there's a lot of varying opportunities here. We're going to put this really in the center, so from the side view I'm going to put this about right there, but from the front view I do want to make sure that it's relatively in the position of where that collarbone would be, so maybe a little lower. But this joint is going to be a combination of collarbone and scapula as well, or the shoulder blade. So we're going to call that our collarbone, but it's going to be really in the middle between the two. Let's hit Control D to duplicate. And from the front view, let's turn on our wireframe on shaded. We're going to put this in the center of the shoulder, which is relatively going to be right there, something like that. Now this is a joint that after we do some skinning in the next steps, like we may have to move this around to make sure the body doesn't weirdly deform that shoulder or armpit area, but that's a good starting point for the shoulder. I'm going to go to the top view and just make sure that it's relatively in the center of the body. And then I just move back and forth between my different views to see if it's positioned where I need it to be. That looks pretty good. This is going to be my shoulder. Alright, duplicate, and I'm going to move this down to the center of the elbow. I'll go to a top view. This needs to be back further, so that way we have this behind the shoulder joint. Something right there. Okay, now let's just go back to all of our views. That looks pretty good. Now anatomically this joint would be back here, but then that would create some pinching in the front of the geometry. So we're just going to put this in the middle. Alright, we'll hit Control D, and we'll move that out for the wrist. Let's go to our front view. Move it down a little bit. I'll have to go to top view to be able to see fully. And then top view, we need to move it forward. So we're really going to kind of put this right here on this joint there. So this needs to be in front of the elbow. Okay, so the elbow is behind everything. The shoulder is in front of the elbow. The wrist is in front of the elbow. Let's go to our perspective view. Hit F to zoom, and let's just look at that geometry there. It looks pretty good. All right, we'll come back to do the fingers here in a minute, but let's go ahead and name all of these. So this is a joint left wrist, so J_L_ for left. J_L_ elbow. You can call these by the bone names if you want to. J_L_ shoulder. But I find it easier just to call it the layman terms. we'll call this one the collar. Okay. Because that one needs to be kind of in the center. We can go ahead and parent these up and then talk about the hands. So before we parent things up, we need to make sure we rotate each one so that way it follows to the next joint. So let's get our rotate tool, hit the plus symbol to scale this up, and make sure the z-axis follows the next joint down. Okay. Here's my shoulder. I want to make sure that follows to the elbow. What's also really good from the side view, or front view, sorry, is these should be pretty in line with each other, but we also want to make sure that the y-axis also follows in axis to the elbow as well. So let's do Q to select tool and get the elbow. Make sure the z-axis for the elbow follows to the wrist. And then we'll get the wrist, and I'm just going to put the wrist z-axis following down the center, really in between my middle and ring finger, something like that. That should be pretty good. All right, go back to perspective view. Let's scale down my manipulator, and let's parent up. Select the left wrist, shift select the elbow, and P for parent. Select the elbow, shift select the shoulder, P for parent. Select the shoulder, shift select the collar, P for parent. We'll come back and mirror this over in a little bit, but there's my arm structure so far. My collarbone might be a little high. Typically your shoulders are in line with your collarbone, so maybe I'll unparent and move my collarbone just a little bit. I don't want to be too crazy, but yeah, maybe I'll do it like that. That looks pretty good. So now hit Shift P, move a joint around, and then parent it back up. Here we go. Not as drastic there. All right, so there's our arm structure. And now we're going to create the joints for the fingers. So I've kind of curled some of my fingers around, so some of them is going to be a little bit kind of complex how we're going to move them around. But with the joint tool, we'll go create the ends of the fingers and then come back and create some carpal bones back here as well for proper rotate. So let's start with our pointer finger. We need a joint at the base, so something right there. I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate, move it over, position it in the center of the first joint, and then position the next one, the second joint, and then one at the tip of the finger. Okay, so now from the top view, we need to move them up. Okay, so we'll move these up. Try to position these in the center of the mass. So maybe from a front view, this will work well. So that's pretty good for the root. Control and drag select to deselect that first joint. Let's move this one down some. Control to deselect. Move this one down, and then the tip of the finger, we're going to put that about right there. Move it back a little. There you go. All right, so from the perspective view, we just want to make sure it's all positioned properly. This one's a little low, so move it up some. There we go. All right, so we do want to go ahead and rotate these so that they are rotated towards the next joint. Probably the easiest way to do this is just to look at it from the perspective view. I'm going to rotate it so that the z-axis is following down the length and the y-axis. Let's see. Yeah, the y-axis needs to go outward as well. There you go. Z-axis needs to go down. Pretty good. All right, so here's the next one. We'll rotate the Z. So that follows down, and then we'll rotate the Y follows down as well. So rotate the Z, rotate the Y, so that follows. We can also do it to the fingertip. So rotate it so that kind of follows what would be the length of that finger there. That's pretty good. All right, within each finger, we need 4 joints, but then to properly create the curling of the hand, we need another joint. This is going to be our carpal joint. So I'm going to duplicate that base finger joint and kind of pull this back here somewhere at the base of where the carpal finger joint would be, something like that. Make sure that's in the center of the mass. Pretty good. Okay, so that will allow curling of the pointer finger to the pinky finger. All right, so that joint should follow to the length of the base finger joint. All right, so to cut down some of the time, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. I'm going to go ahead and create the rest of the finger joints. We'll come back and do the thumb after that, but it's going to be the same process, and then I'll come back and show you what I've done there. All right, in Magic, the rest of my fingers have been created. This does take some time to set up, so that's why instead of wasting more video time, I just went ahead and created that. I did the same exact process. I created one joint, and then I duplicated it over for the other fingers. The key thing to make sure as you do the other fingers of your character, or if this is toes, is that you go back through and make sure you rotate them so that the rotates of each joint follow to the next joint away from the body. So this joint rotate both in the Z and the Y should follow this next joint of the finger, and then the same thing down here. This joint should follow in the X and the Y to the next joint. So my X axis is going to be perpendicular to the length of the finger. So here are all of my finger joints. I have 4 for the fingers, and then I have 4 carpal bones. So that's going to allow me to rotate, curl my hand properly. So those are my individual finger joints. I'm going to come back. Let's go ahead and create our thumb joints as well. So from the top view, actually let's just duplicate one of these joints. We'll take our one of our carpal bones here, and we're going to pull this one back to kind of the base of where that thumb would kind of start to rotate, which is really kind of back here somewhere. We'll go ahead and try to rotate the Z-axis towards the next joint area, something like that. I'm going to duplicate that, and we will kind of move this to the base of where the thumb would start to bend. About right there. We'll go to our perspective view so we can see. That looks pretty good. Maybe down a little bit. The rotate for this one should follow to the next joint, which is really going to be, move this out a little, this joint right there. I'm not going to have much curvature. So let's duplicate and move this there. Move it down. So as far as positioning, the finger joints are probably the most complex because they might be modeled in an angle like what I've done here. Move it forward here a little bit. Okay. And we will rotate this one so that it follows to the end. Rotate it out a little. Down. There you go. Now we need one more for the fingertip, which is really going to be back here. There we go. Try to follow that angle as well. There we go. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so those are my my thumb joints. I'm going to pause the video again and rename these. I'll come back and I'll do renaming or talk about renaming. But since this is kind of time consuming, well, I'm going to go ahead and pause that. We're not going to spend several minutes renaming. All right, in Magic, my joints are already named. Or I've spent the time naming, and just pause the video. So I've named everything joint thumb 1 through 4. Okay, and then I've named my carpals joint left carpal pointer, joint left carpal middle, and so forth. And then each finger, I've named them joint pointer 1, 2, 3, 4, joint middle 1, 2, 3, 4, joint ring 1, 2, 3, 4, and then joint pinky 1, 2, 3, 4. Note that I did change it so it's J_L for the left hand versus right hand. So that way when I need to do that down here. So J_L_thumb. So that way the left hand can have individual joints compared to the right hand. I'm going to finish this up. There you go. All right, so now I'm ready to parent up my finger joints up to the wrist. The wrist is parented to the rest of the body. And then we can mirror over and be done with the arm. So I'm going to take the last thumb joint, shift select the next one, and hit P for parent. Select the thumb joint 3, the thumb joint 2, P for parent. Thumb joint 2 to thumb joint 1, P for parent. So I'm going to work my way outward towards the center of the body. I'm hitting P for parent each time I do this. Carpals. So as long as the tapered part of the bone goes to away from the torso towards the end of the fingers, they will be set up properly. Okay, so last finger here, I'm shift selecting and hitting P for parent. Trying not to select the body. Okay, P for parent. All right, so now we need to take the base of our thumb and the carpals. So we can say carpal pointer, carpal middle, carpal ring, carpal pinky, and then thumb. And then shift select the wrist and hit P for parent. Okay. So that way the entire hand is connected up to that collarbone. So if I select the collarbone, that should select all of my joints all the way to the ends of the fingers. The last thing to do here for the arms is to parent the collar to this spine 3. So I'm not going to parent the collar to a neck joint because I want the neck to rotate independently. So I'm going to make sure I parent the collar to the spine 3 here. So let's hit P for parent. Okay, if I click the pelvis again, let's just select everything. And then we'll go back and select the left collar joint. And then let's go up to that mirror function again. So skeleton, mirror joints, and the box beside it. We're going to make sure we do YZ again, and then search for L, replace with R. So that way it'll mirror it over and rename it right hip, or right collar, right shoulder. Let's do apply. There you go, close. I shouldn't have to make any adjustments pending that your model is symmetrical, which this one is. If it's asymmetrical, still mirror it over and then make your adjustments to the individual joints then. All right, so now our entire body system, it has joints set up with it. We don't have smaller little joints like the face or twist or helper joints for other areas that might cause problems. We'll come back and do some of those in a later video. But now we have from head to toe our entire joint system. If I hold down shift on the plus symbol beside joint pelvis, here are all of my joints for the body. We do have a lot, but it's necessary to create this amount so that the body does animate properly. Next video, we'll come back and talk about helper joints and how those can correct some blending deformation issues, and then adding facial joints.